One of the provincial government's pandemic relief measures is set to expire at the end of the month. Infectious Disease Emergency Leave was extended back in December, but workers who may have been laid off might now be called back to work. Employment lawyer Alex Lucifero joins us now for more on this. Alex, first of all, let's recap IDEL quickly if we can. For those that aren't familiar, what was it? How was it used?
Sure, absolutely, Matt. So the Infectious Disease Emergency Leave, IDEL, was introduced by the provincial government here in Ontario in 2020 to allow for effectively COVID-related layoffs in very particular situations. So employees who were placed on layoff as a result of workplaces being shut down and the various lockdowns that happened over the course of the pandemic, some employers were able to exercise this leave of absence effectively that's related to COVID-19. And this has been the hot button topic really of the past 2 years in the employment law world. Matt, a couple of decisions on the particular subject, which we can certainly get into.
Okay, so let's talk about those. Let's talk about those decisions, shall we? So someone is coming to an end at the end of this month, someone on an IDEL layoff, when can they be expected to be called back to work, and just expand on those decisions?
Sure, absolutely. So IDEL is currently set to expire on July 30th. That means that for any employees, and you can imagine we are 2 years and 4 months later, Matt, any employees that are still on this leave of absence, on this COVID layoff, should be called back to work by July 30th of this year. If they haven't been called back to work, then they are potentially deemed terminated under our Employment Standards Act. Now, it should be noted, Matt, that this IDEL, these COVID temporary layoffs, only apply in very particular situations. And there are certain employees and a good number of employees that don't necessarily have to accept the initial layoff. Many employees have actually treated the layoff as a termination and obtained severance packages.
Okay, so can employees still then at this point too, if they're on the layoff, let's talk about severance too as well. You said some of them have pursued it, others have not. What are they entitled to, and at what point, where does it become a termination?
Sure. So let's get into the weeds a little bit here quickly. So for non-unionized employees and for employees who do not have temporary layoffs as a term of their employment, as an established term of employment, those employees, Matt, didn't have to accept these temporary layoffs to begin with. The established principle in employment law is that you cannot force an employee to accept a temporary layoff. That is what's called a constructive dismissal. It's basically a termination without cause, in which case that employee would be owed severance. So there are two scenarios here. Employees who have been laid off already can claim termination as a result of the temporary layoff in and of itself. And again, secondly, as we were just discussing, if employees are not called back to work by July 30th, that may very well be a termination in and of itself, at which point those employees would still be owed severance even 2 years and 4 months later.
Okay, so and again, before I let you go, I just want to kind of wrap up too, as we talk about those decisions. What were the decisions on, and as we start to see this start transition fully off of IDEL, and employees are hopefully called back to work?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's been quite an important topic in employment law over the past couple of years. Effectively, the decisions have confirmed what has been the status quo in employment law for a few decades, which is that temporary layoffs cannot be enforced upon an employee. The employee needs to accept a temporary layoff as a term of employment. If they do not accept temporary layoffs as a term of employment, they can treat the layoff as a termination and obtain severance. That is what our courts have said, also with respect to these COVID layoffs and infectious disease emergency leave.
Certainly, as we talk about, again, not everyone aware that this was still in place, but I think if there's an employer or a worker who is on one of these leaves, they know this, and to make them aware of that. Alex Lucifero, always appreciate your time. Thank you for this, sir.
Thanks, Matt.